This here's the hydrologic cycle or the water cycle. Simple idea. Here's water on Earth. It's a constant. We only have so much of it. But the key characteristic is it moves in different states. And so, of course, in our oceans, our large water bodies, we're going to get evaporation. And with evaporation, we're going to get water turning from a liquid to a gas in the form of water vapor. Of course, we've talked about precipitation. Of course, with precipitation, when we can move that water that's being evaporated from the oceans, our large water bodies, over land. And then at that point, we get then water falling in the form of condensation, i.e. precipitation falling down to the surface. From there, we get the water that filters through the surface. We've referred to that as infiltration or percolation. But then also we've got water that flows on the surface. We can think of that as surface runoff or just essentially streams, rivers, creeks, what have you. Further, trees, they are also a key part of the hydrologic cycle. Of course, they soak up water, especially from that top layer of the surface, and so they soak up that water, and then they perspire that water on their leaves, and eventually that water on the leaves is going to evaporate as well. So this whole idea is water moves in a cycle, in various forms, various states. Many of the current processes that influence landform change are due to those same temperature and precipitation characteristics of areas that we talk about in the Exam 2 content. And so once again we have the idea of this content building and building and building. So one of the things we're going to talk about is weathering and erosion. And that's key to understanding that is that's where we have the atmospheric influences of temperature and precipitation now reacting with that underlying surface. So we have that underlying bedrock, also referred to as parent rock, which is exposed to these atmospheric influences and thus going to be softened and broken up into smaller bits of rock, which is called regolith. Regolith is that layer of mineral particles that are above the underlying bedrock, and so essentially it's broken up bits and pieces of the underlying bedrock due to the atmospheric influences. And so one of the things we'll talk about here in video of regolith being the source for much of the sediment that is moved, eroded, and transported and deposited in other places. And so we think about what moves it: moving water, rivers, moving air, wind, moving ice, glaciers. And so I mention this now because this is going to be something we're going to come back to time and time again.